All right, let's start this thing.
Let's light it up. Roll intro by Brew Battle. Welcome to the Precon Life Podcast, where we solved the pregame Rule Zero talk. We just don't have them. Instead, we level up basic Magic the Gathering pre-constructed decks in a competitive league setting. Everyone starts on a level playing field with an unaltered precon. Each player brews a budget upgrade path to level up their deck over a 10-week season in a quest to earn the most wins. Take it and break it on a budget. I'm Clutchness.
I'm Grumpy Chris.
And I'm Saki Juicebox.
Welcome to the podcast. Pass priority.
It's been 2 weeks since we recorded. That's 2 losses for me, 2 losses for you as well, Sake, right?
Yep, absolutely. 2 very bad losses.
And 1 victory and 1 loss for you, Brant.
That's correct.
Yeah, I lost to
All
Brent.
right. Who else is winning? Let's talk about who the winners have been.
Well, Dan and I were in a pretty greasy game with Jeff, and he's got a win under his belt, but I feel like he's gonna be a threat, at least for mid-season, because of his big beaters in the air. But I'll tell you who I'm worried about, Catonius. He's at 2 wins already. He's leading the season. Have you guys played against him yet?
He was last season's champion, right?
Exactly. We can't let him beat us 2 seasons in a row.
So far, it's been shown that the best strategy you can have in Precon League is run a commander that has 1-card combos with multiple cheap cards, and that's exactly what Kevin has done. He's running Abdel Adrian and Candlekeep Sage, and it goes infinite with a ham sandwich.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
The pod we were in, I told everyone that he was going to go off. He went off on turn 5 in the previous game. He can go off with as little as 5 mana. And
very low ceiling.
Told them right at the beginning that we were going to have to kill Kevin. And what ended up happening was they promptly ended up fighting with each other. And then when we were set up to kill Kevin, they decided at that moment to defect and let him live. So what ended up happening was he got 2 extra turns and won the game at 4 life.
That's what he said. He said he was at 4 life, and Chris was totally telling everyone, he put in all caps, to attack. And he said they turned on each other when I was low and looked like I was out of the game. So I guess they underestimated him. They thought he was shut down. They thought he was offline. But like you said, one extra card, that's all he needs.
He seems to be pretty good at playing the crowd. He seems pretty good at politics. Aside from being a good player, I mean, there is no doubt that he can make the deck do the things it needs to do. It's interesting.
Yeah, so he's running this Blink deck, basically a newfangled Brago 2.0. Brago's in the 99, got demoted.
He was intending to run Brago, but having played, I think we covered this in the last episode, so I'm not going to go over it. I told him to go with Abdel Adrian and Candlekeep Sage because he could use the same strategy, but it actually gives him a win con from the command zone.
Yeah.
So he can actually win the game rather than just dirtle.
Mm-hmm.
And he's doing exactly what I told him to. Yeah, my bad. Sorry, guys.
So we found out, actually, Dan and I found out that you've given ideas to me, to Dan, to Kevin, and Jeff. There's so many. It's like basically your fingers are in all the pies.
My finger is in all the pies, except I'm incredibly proud of Jeff's deck this season. Jeff's deck is genius. Absolute genius. I want to talk about it for just a second because it's just...
Sure, this Draconic Destruction. This out of the box doesn't look that impressive, but he's done some cool stuff. And in a Precon League, it's powerful.
Absolutely. I think it would be powerful in just once he upgrades this, I could easily see him taking this to any card shop and doing an awful lot of damage. He replaced the commander of Draconic Destruction, which is a Tarka World Render, out of the box, and he replaced it with Hansk Slayer Zealot, who is the in-universe version of Daryl Slayer of Walkers from the Walking Dead secret lair. The infamous Walking Dead secret lair.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about it. I'm still salty.
Yeah, it's a painful. Anyway, but Hansk is too generic and gruel. He's a legendary creature, human archer. He's a 4/4. But the important thing about him is at the beginning of your upkeep, target opponent creates 3 walker tokens. Those are 2/2 black zombie creatures. You can tap Hansk Slayer Zealot to deal 2 damage to a target creature. And whenever a zombie an opponent controls dies, draw a card. So every turn, Hansk gives somebody 3 zombies. And what Jeff is doing is he's playing all those little board wipes.
Pyroclasm. 2 damage to every creature.
Right. Vampires of Vengeance. You know, there are a dozen of them. Breath of Flame. I think that, anyway, I'm not going to know all the names. But the general idea is every turn, you wipe out those zombies and you draw 3 cards. And the fact is that one of the strongest things that you can do in Precon League and kind of in Magic in general is somehow make board wipes better for you.
One-sided.
Yeah. And what he's doing is it solves the card draw problem in Gruul. It makes your board wipes one-sided because most of your creatures are big enough that they're not going to be killed by it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, in general, it's fabulous. I had nothing to do with it. This is all Jeff.
Oh, it's great. Yeah, and Earthquake is highly effective because he's got flyers, right? Everything he was beating us down with were flyers, but he had plenty of mana to recast Hansk Slayer Zealot. But I'll tell you, one of the things that I think is brilliant is Ether Flash. It's 2 red and 2, an enchantment, and whenever any creature comes into play, Ether Flash deals 2 damage to that creature. So beginning of his upkeep, he gives one of us 3 walkers, they immediately die, he gets 3 cards.
And that's so good. It is
so good.
There are so many go wide decks.
Yep, and that's Hanks and Ether Flash. You all can pick it up for less than $3.50. $3.50.
That's right, the whole thing.
Yep. It was a pet card of mine. I used to run it back in the day, like 20 years ago, in a Repercussions deck.
Anyway, his other stuff is pretty obvious. It's the Dragon deck. But that's really impressive. Kevin's deck is very impressive. Who else took home a win? Andrew, right?
I haven't played against him yet.
I haven't either. But from what I can tell, it's a upgrade of the Ruthless Regiment deck using Sylvar, Devourer of the Free, and Trin, Champion of Freedom. Essentially, it's a Mardu Aristocrats strategy, which is always, aristocrats are always good.
Right, which actually is one of the reasons that I'm adding a certain card that I'm adding this week, because there's so many people running aristocrats. At least it feels like it.
What are you putting in?
Yeah, what are you putting in?
Sure, I'll go first. But before we do, this is the way it works with Precon League. Each week, we can actually swap out up to 5 cards, up to $5 worth total. If you don't spend all of your upgrade budget, you can roll that over to the next week. So if I had $1 left over this week because I only spent 4, next week I have 6 that I can work with. The only thing that you can swap for free is basics. Like if you took out a bunch of red cards and replaced them with all white pip cards, then you could trade out some of your basics to mana fix. But if you remove a non-basic, that counts as one of your 5 cards. So each week, 5. So last episode, we talked about which 5 cards I was going to go with to start. Ashnod's Altar, because, it's a win con. Foundry Inspector to reduce spells. Workshop Assistant, put in work. Whenever it dies, you get another artifact from your graveyard back to your hand. 8 cents, and it put in work. I put in this Elas. I'm going to go with Elas Ilkor, Sadistic Pilgrim. I haven't got to play this guy yet, but he's in there, and I added Cathodian, which actually is pretty funny with ways to bring it back, and Ashnod's Altar. So I lost that week, but I saw what I needed. And I'll tell you, with just 10 cards of upgrades, you can take the Invent Superiority Precon and turn it into something pretty cool. Nim's Death Mantle. Of course, there's so many combos with Nim's Death Mantle and Ashnod's Altar, because you can, sack a creature, get 2 colorless from Ashnod's, and then the creature goes to the graveyard. You need 2 more mana, and you can bring it back with Nim's Death Mantle attached to it, right? And so I've got my commander. She comes in and brings me 2 Thopters, so I can sack 1 Thopter and her. That gives me the 4 mana. Bring it back with Nim's Death Mantle. She comes back into play. ETB on the stack. Get 2 more Thopters, and I basically generate an extra Thopter. So I've added Eldrazi Displacer to help with that same kind of combo, but in a different way, without having to use the graveyard. So Eldrazi Displacer is 1 white, 2 other. It's a creature Eldrazi, 3/3, devoid. But what really matters on this card is that you can spend a colorless and 2, generic, exile another target creature, then return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. So with Breya, ETB, getting 2 Thopters, then I sack 2 Thopters, get 4 mana, spend 3 of it on the Eldrazi Displacer. She basically flickers back in and then gives me 2 more. And then I can keep doing that and gaining 1 colorless mana each time. Eventually, I have infinite colorless mana, and then with infinite mana, you can sack the infinite Thopters, trigger Breya infinitely, deal 3 damage to target player over and over and over and over until you win. So the combo that actually I was able to pull off, and Dan, man, I still feel bad about it because you had that win with your combo. But we'll talk about that in here in a bit, but a well-timed instant. And it basically king made me, but I was able to go off with Nim's Death Mantle, Breya, and Ashnod's Altar. Scrap Trawler is another one that I've added. Yeah, go ahead.
No, it just supports, I was going to say it supports what Chris was saying a few minutes ago about having a 1 to 2 card combo in the command zone. You were able to pull it off just using your commander and a couple other cards.
That's true, and I think that's probably why I lost most every game last season, because I didn't have that. Yeah. And so Scrap Trawler is another ad, 26 cents, good value here. 3-drop, 3/2 artifact creature construct. When Scrap Trawler or another artifact I control is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, I can return to my hand target artifact in my graveyard that has less CMC than Scrap Trawler. So basically 2, 1, or 0. And so that actually works with Mirror Retriever. And so you can do some cool stuff with that and loop them back and forth, especially if I have a cost reducer in play. Mind Stone, just to be able to help ramp some stuff out, and I can sack it to draw a card and get it back with Scrap Trawler, for example. If I really need cards, I could loop that and kind of get some action that way. Another way to try to get some action, hit some spice, is with Riddlesmith. This is one that you all mentioned. I haven't drawn into it yet, but I'm hoping that it works out well, because I like what you all were saying, how that, it's a 2-drop, 1 blue, 1 other, 2/1, who cares? Creature, human, artificer. But when I cast an artifact spell, I get to draw a card and then discard. So normally I wouldn't want to be discarding, but the fact that I've got Scrap Trawler, I've got lots of ways, Workshop Assistant, and then the deck comes with lots of ways to bring things back. That's where I think it'll shine, because I'll be able to get those cards back and just filter through my deck. So looking into what I need this next week is that I do need more card draw. There were some times where it was a little boring. I didn't do a lot of actions on a turn, but luckily the deck has a lot of graveyard recursion. And that graveyard recursion was able to help keep me in the game, giving me access to cards, even though I'd already played them, but it's still giving me access to extra cards. And so that was really handy. But I need more cards. So this week I'm adding Mystic Forge. It's a 4-drop artifact that you can look at the top card of your library at any time. You can cast artifact spells or colorless spells from the top of your library, and then you can tap it, pay a life, and exile the top card of your library. So with that, it's going to be able to help me churn through the deck faster since it has so many artifacts. And by adding Joyra, Weatherlight Captain, it's red, blue, 2 other, legendary creature, human artificer, 3/3. Whenever you cast a historic spell, you get to draw a card. Historic spells are artifacts, legendaries, and sagas. So since my deck's an artifact deck, I'm going to be able to draw into a lot of cards. Check the next card on top with Mystic Forge. Okay, it's an artifact. Cast it off the top. Look at the next one. Oh, it's a land. Exile it. Look at the next one. Yeah, it's an artifact. Rinse and repeat, and try to go until I run out of mana. So one way that I can keep that loop going longer with Mystic Forge is Enthusiastic Mechanaut. It's 1 red, 1 blue, 2/2, artifact creature, Goblin Artificer. It flies, and artifact spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. So I've already got a couple of cost reducers in the deck, and I want to get more. That's the next one. 20 cents. And then to get to my win con, I've got Trophy Mage. Trophy Mage is a 2/2 for 1 blue and 2, creature, human, wizard. And when Trophy Mage enters the battlefield, you can search your library for an artifact card with CMC 3, reveal it, put it into your hand, shuffle. So that way I can go get a couple of things. 1, I could go get my Ashnod's Altar. 2, I could get Scrap Trawler. 3, I could get Workshop Assistant. And when Workshop Assistant dies, I can return an artifact from my graveyard to my hand. So if Ashnod's is already in the graveyard, I could use my Trophy Mage to go get a Workshop Assistant. Take that, pull Ashnod's back out, recast. So it's basically just trying to get this combo off as fast as possible. I'm adding as many clocks as I can. I am going to need to make room for answers. I haven't really thought about that too much, but I do have one that's kind of a clock and an answer. And I think this is going to be helpful. So in Ravnica Remastered, there's some pretty spicy reprints. Mayhem Devil, that's normally $3.50, just dropped in price because it got reprinted as an uncommon, and it's 77 cents market price on TCG Player. 3/3 for 3, black, red, 1. Creature Devil. Whenever a player sacrifices a permanent, Mayhem Devil deals 1 damage to any target. So here's the idea. There were times that I've noticed in the last several games where -4 was not enough to kill the opponent's creatures. I needed
dragons.
Those dragons, they were all 6s. So I thought with Mayhem Devil, I trigger Breya, do a -4, that triggers Mayhem Devil twice, that does 6. Plus, if my commander is dead, I can still do loops to try to kill people, and it'll slow down, hopefully, the other people that are using a lot of sacrifice strategies. We're playing against Necron Dynasty. He's using aristocrat strategies. You know, you were talking about Andrew's deck where he's doing aristocrat type strategies. Then we've got the Food and Fellowship. He's cracking food, you know, make a food, get a dude. Yeah. And then so now instead of gaining 3, he's only gaining 2. So that slows him down a little, but the idea would be basically I want to get this upgrade in while it's 77 cents before it goes back up. And it also helps feed my strategy. And just the fact that I had a lot of little creatures that were really messing us up, like a vampire that drains the table every time something happens. And it's a 2/2. You know, I really needed just some answers to be able to pop those guys, get them off the board, and not have to worry about it. What do you think?
Well, Mayhem Devil is a hell of an upgrade. The fact that it's dropped down below $1 is a pretty big deal for Precon League. And the signets are a big deal as well. They were always within range, but the fact that you can add one for 50 cents instead of, $1.50 is a pretty big deal. I'm liking your ads. The only thing I'm not liking that I'm seeing is the fact that all of them cost 3. Well, except for
you got 2 drop.
You got 2 of them that cost 3.
Yeah,
the previous upgrade, a lot of them cost 3. I'm a little concerned that your mana curve is getting a little fat, but it doesn't really matter as long as you're goldfishing it and it seems to play okay.
Yeah, that's it's got 2 2-drop, 2 3-drops, and 2 4-drops, and then I took out a 2 3-drops, a 5-drop, and 2 6s. So
but those don't matter because you were never going to cast them.
I was never going to cast them. That's true. Yeah, and so the idea would be, there's Mystic Forge is competing with my commander, but it's probably going to be more of a late game card. Joyra could compete with my commander, but if I don't have the right colors for my commander, I could at least get her out, which would help me get to the mana that I need to get.
I was actually in the pod with Brant that he won, and I wanted to ask him about the Sphinx that he kept recurring that is a tutor.
Good point, actually, because, I didn't talk about my MVP for the deck. So that's the thing, is that this card, I would have originally thought, okay, this card's a 5-drop. This thing's going to be taken out so fast. And it was actually on the chopping block when I first built the deck, right? Or got the deck together. I thought, which cards are going to come out? This is in my top 10 chopping block. But after playing it, this was an MVP. So it's called Sphinx Summoner, and it's a 5-drop. But in Precon League, this is pretty powerful, right? Because we're not going up against high power CDH. But this is a 3/3 flyer, which didn't matter too much, but it did stop some dragons. When Sphinx Summoner enters the battlefield, you may search your library for an artifact creature card, reveal it, and put it into your hand. If you do, shuffle your library. So then what I did is I went and I got Sharum, who is a 6-drop. It's Esper and 3 for a 5/5 legendary artifact creature Sphinx. Flying, when Sharum the Hegemon enters the battlefield, you may return target artifact card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So then I would bring the Sphinx back and then go get another artifact creature. And then I got an artifact creature that, let's see, one of them was Baleful Strix to start getting some cards. I was able to get stuff like Mirror Retriever and things to start getting some stuff back.
Exactly. In the last combo that you pulled off in the game, I think you looped that twice and was able to pull out things like the Mirror Retriever to then pull other artifacts into your hand, making more mana. Because I think you looped it a couple times.
I did, yeah. With Ashnod's Altar, because I cast the Sphinx, and then I sacked the Sphinx for mana to help cast Sharum the Hegemon, and then when she came into play, she brought the Sphinx back into play from the graveyard, and then that got me a second tutor, and then I sacked it again, and I think I tutored for the Mirror Retriever, and then played it, and then brought her back to my hand, the Sphinx back to my hand. Yeah, and so it actually, I was surprised how well Sphinx Summoner, Sharum, and any of those artifact creatures that get stuff back from the graveyard they work really well together.
Good. Yeah, looks like it's coming along pretty well.
You were saying that you had figured out your line after like a year of trying to figure this out.
That's for a completely different deck. I've been working on Takasia as an upgrade to Token Triumph, which I might try next season.
Interesting.
It's a very different strategy though. It's a graveyard centric Bant strategy but what I've been doing, it's really got nothing to do with what I was doing here. What I'm doing with Token Triumph right now is, I've talked about it last time, we're just trying to go wide. And so far, it's doing a pretty good job of going wide. I haven't seen, in the last 2 games, I've seen literally nothing that I added in the first week. Shorikai, Steward of Solidarity, Springleaf Drum, Simic Growth Chamber, none of them have shown up in my games. I've had a few that showed up in my second upgrade, though, that we haven't talked about. And they were pretty good for me. The most important one, well, it was a combination of them. The big one was Thraben Doomsayer, which is a white human cleric, 2 white pips and 1. You can just tap him to create a 1/1 white human creature token. And then he's got an ability that is probably never going to be used called Fateful Hour. As long as you have 5 or less life, other creatures you control get +2/+2. At one point in the game, which were later on expended, at one point my army was about 35 tokens.
Wow.
35 humans and soldiers.
So did you say you made 8? It kind of cut out, but you said that you made 8 tokens in a turn?
I think the maximum that I made in one turn was about 6.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah. Once you have enough creatures on board, and you have Derevi on board, and you have something like Thraben Doomsayer, you can just continually use those tap effects and untap effects to just generate a huge army, which is the whole idea behind the deck.
So if people don't know, Derevi is the flyer, it's his commander, that when one of his creatures deals combat damage to a player, he can tap or untap non-land permanent, right? No, just permanent, right?
Permanent, period.
Wow.
Any permanent.
So you're getting damage through with go wide token strategy, right? You're getting some damage through, say 5-6 creatures get through, some of them die, but then you tap this guy, untap him, tap him, untap him, tap him, untap him, and you make 5 or 6 creatures like that each turn. It's pretty incredible. Yeah.
So that's, we covered that last session. One of the things, though, that I've had to deal with is the fact that Bant really has no way to deal direct damage. Last season I was in Naya, and you could do things like Perforos and Impact Tremors and Goblin Bombardment, all the things that red have that just directly hit people in the face. The season before that, I was in Orzhov, and I could use things like Nadier's Nightblade and Mirkwood Bats and all that other aristocrats type outlets to do damage to the whole table. I can't really do anything like that in Bant. So the MVP last game was actually Harmonious Archon, which is a really weird, it's a mythic that is a whopping 19 cents. It's a really strange card. I'm going to read it off. It's 2 white and 4. It's a creature Archon. It's got flying. And the text of it is, non-Archon creatures have base power and toughness 3/3. When Harmonious Archon enters the battlefield, create 2 1/1 white human creature tokens. So, and it's a 4/5. So, when you're running a strategy where you're making a million 1/1s, you're just going to have to attack into a superior position and try to get enough tokens through to do your damage. With Harmonious Archon on the table, you're always, unless somebody has +1/+1 counters or something along those lines, you're always going to trade. You will always trade because everything is now at base a 3/3.
I see what you mean, because it turns your opponent's non-Archon creatures into 3/3s as well. And
3/3.
Who runs Archons? Come on. Nobody. So you're the only one.
Yeah.
And you get a 4/5 flyer on top of that to just swing over with evasion.
Yeah, exactly. And it also had a weird interaction with the Food and Fellowship deck, because what the first thing I believe that becoming a ring bearer gives you is an effect like Skulk, where you can't block a creature with power less. Or,
Dan kept beating us up with that.
Yeah,
we got real familiar with it last game. Thanks, Dan.
Right, and suddenly Skulk just doesn't work because at base everything is a 3/3, including Frodo Baggins. So that shut down my opponent. You're going to see a theme in what I add. Like last time, I added Shorkai Genesis Engine because it helps me draw cards, and in conjunction with Derevi, it makes token creatures that I can attack with to get more Derevi triggers.
So perfect.
I added Steward of Solidarity, which is basically a cheaper version of the Thraven Doomsayer.
Mm-hmm.
I added something to fix my mana in Simic Growth Chamber and in Springleaf Drum. This time, I'm basically following the same thing. For color fixing, I added Utopia Sprawl, which is an enchantment. It's 1 green. You can only enchant a forest. And as Utopia Sprawl enters the battlefield, choose a color. Whenever enchanted forest is tapped for mana, its controller adds an additional 1 mana of the chosen color. There you go. Just something to fix, because this was originally a Selesnya deck, and I'm adding blue. So I have to add something probably every week. There's going to be a slot in there to fix my colors.
I've actually lately been thinking, why don't more people run Utopia Sprawl? Because enchantments are pretty sticky. Black can barely deal with them. Let's say you drop it turn 1, you don't do anything, but then you've got 3 on turn 2, or you drop it turn 2 and you still have 2 mana and you didn't lose anything. And that's kind of where I was thinking, right? Turn 1, you drop like an elf. Turn 2, you drop that, and then, or anything turn 1, and then you drop this turn 2, and you still have 2 mana because you can put it on the land that's untapped. But I guess it's because it's Enchant Forest. Is that the reason?
That is the reason. At the lowest level of power in a game, it's really good because people are running a lot of basics. The places where we're playing, most of the land is basics. As you move up in the power level, you have fewer and fewer basics.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty common at the shop that I play at for the people at the highest, playing the most powerful decks to have no basics at all.
I think that's a mistake. I always run at least 3. Usually, my CEDH decks all have 3. Even though they're 4-color decks, they have 3. And the 3 lands that it lets me get are the ones that help pay for removal in case I'm under Blood Moon.
I think that's a good strategy. And I also think that in CEDH, you're usually running all the fetches.
Mm-hmm.
You can play Utopia Sprawl. More than likely, one of the first lands you're going to get is going to be a Savannah or a Tropical Island or a Bayou.
In TNT, for sure.
Absolutely. So a Utopia Sprawl, I think, is overlooked in CEDH because you are likely to have a forest in play. I'm not sure why. It probably just isn't powerful enough.
I guess it's just more sticky.
It's more sticky, and in a world with Orcish Bowmasters, running Mana Dorks just isn't a thing. Mana Dorks are just not going to survive.
Yeah, that's why I haven't played TMT lately. I took out most of the 1 toughness Mana Dorks, but
this isn't a CEDH podcast. Let's get back to that.
But yeah, this Utopia Sprawl, I was thinking if we run Mono Rocks, those can get shut off. They get shut off pretty easily. They get destroyed pretty easily. But enchantments are a little more sticky, and people don't notice because nobody ever targets your lands. But when you have a bunch of Mono Rocks, they're like, well, look how much mana they have. If you just have a little enchant land, nobody seems to notice. It looks like lower threat.
Precisely. The other ads this week are Selfless Spirit. 1 white and 1. It's creature, spirit, cleric. It's got flying, and you can sacrifice Selfless Spirit. Creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. I'm in a go-wide strategy. I'm going to have to be putting a lot of stuff onto the board. I have to have ways to keep that stuff on the board. I can't survive too many board wipes.
And it's a closed meta, and we know there's a lot of board wipes, especially for 1 toughness.
Right. And the sort of Shorikai equivalent, and I don't know if I can even say that, but the Shorikai equivalent in this week's upgrades are Hilda of the Icy Crown, who is a frozen XP. Elsa, right in there. She's from Eldraine, legendary creature, human warlock, 1 white, 1 blue, and 2, and she's just got a wall of text. Whenever you tap an untapped creature an opponent controls, you may pay 1. When you do, choose 1. Create a 4/4 white and blue elemental creature token, or put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control, or scry 2 and then draw a card. Every Derevi trigger that I get from the creatures on board, as long as they can do damage, I can then use those Derevi triggers aren't limited to just untapping my stuff. I can also tap down other players' creatures.
So if I could jump in here, this is something that we didn't see Derevi doing in previous seasons, right? When somebody would run him. But Kevin popped in and talked to Sake and I after the game. He popped into our spell table. We had an extra spot at the end. And so he was telling us about how that you were tapping down other people's creatures, which opens them up for other people to attack. And then you didn't have to waste your guys attacking them. But now I see another reason, because you're tapping them down, you're getting a card, and you don't have to waste the resources attacking.
Or a 4/4, or a +1/+1 counter on every creature I have. And I'm going to have a lot of creatures.
Oh, it is hopefully. Each. Wow. Okay.
Hilda's real strong. She's real strong. And I'm really hoping that I draw her. As for what's getting removed, Voice of Many is getting removed. He's a creature. He's an elf druid. When he enters the battlefield, draw a card for each opponent who controls fewer creatures than you. I think during the first podcast, I said I was going to remove him. I didn't get around to removing him because I ended up removing Overwhelming Instinct and Dawn of Hope instead. Overwhelming Instinct is an enchantment. It says whenever you attack with 3 or more creatures, draw a card. You've got to attack with 3 or more creatures to draw a single card. That's so much work. Dawn of Hope is similar. It's another enchantment. It's 1 white and 1. Whenever you gain life, you can pay 2, and if you do, draw a card. I don't have a lot of life gain in this deck, but it lets you pay 1 white and 3 to create a 1/1 white soldier creature token with lifelink. that's a terrible rate. I'm really not trying to get 1/1s for 4. I don't know why Wizards thinks that's a legit amount of mana to pay for a 1/1, but it's not. Unfortunately, they seem to think that it is because that number shows up everywhere. A 1/1 is worth 4 mana.
I think it's an infinite mana outlet is the way they see it, that if you're ever going to do that to make a bunch of creatures, you won't care about the cost. But 4 is too much for 1/1.
Right. And like I said, that 4, that number 4, it shows up everywhere. Anyway, I don't want to go off on that tangent. Let me stick with the cards that I'm going to remove here so that we can get to Sake's changes. Okay, I'm also removing Conclave Tribunal, which is another white enchantment. A lot of enchantments are going away here. 1 white and 3. It's got Convoke, so your creatures can help cast it by tapping them. I'm going to have a lot of creatures. That's cool. And then when it says, when Conclave Tribunal enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent an opponent controls until Conclave Tribunal leaves the battlefield. What I found with these cards is that they really just incentivize one player to kill you. People hate it when you take their stuff and then you dangle it in front of them. Oh, if I die, you'll get your stuff back. That's a terrible mechanic. It's always been a shame that so much of what has followed that. I get it. Are supposed to be the good guys. They'd rather put people in jail than, remove them. But it just, as a mechanic in multiplayer, just seems terrible. It even opens you up to political machinations where people can be like, I tell you, if I, will you leave me alone if I remove this Conclave Tribunal and get you back your creature? And then on top of that, it exiles the creature, so then it comes back into play and triggers anything, ETBs, whatever. Anyway,
I think
Conclave Tribunal is terrible.
Yeah, I think the key point you just made that we should all remember is that that's not good in multiplayer for those reasons. That's probably more of a dueling card.
Agreed. The next card I removed was Harmonize, which is 2 green and 2. It's a sorcery green, and it just says draw 3 cards. It's not a bad card, but it's just not a great card. And stuff like Hilda of the Icy Crown and Shorakai, I think that I'm just going to get a much better rate on cards if I use those. The next one was Great Oak Guardian, which is 1 green and 5. It's a creature tree folk. It's got Flash, it's got Reach. When Great Oak Guardian enters the battlefield, creatures target player controls get +2/+2 until end of turn, untap them, and it's a 4/5. This is actually a pretty good card. The only thing I don't like about it is the fact that it only gives me a +2/+2, which, adding +2/+2, get me wrong, it's good, but it also means that I have to have an absolutely absurd number of creatures on the battlefield to actually kill somebody. I haven't done the math in my head. Anyway, I didn't think it was powerful enough, so I pulled it.
Better things for 6 mana.
Yeah, better things for 6 mana. Then I'm going to remove Spore Mound. It's 2 green and 3. It's a creature fungus. It's got landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, create a 1/1 green sapperling creature token. This is for landfall decks. I'm not running fetches. I'm not running Splendid Reclamation or anything along those lines. There's no reason to run this card in this deck other than the fact that it gets you it gets you a 1/1 for that. A 3/3 for 5, not great stats either. So it's going away. Those are my adds and my subtracts. If I'm going to make a recommendation here, I think that people should take another look at Harmonious Archon. That is a surprise. It doesn't look good. It just doesn't look good when you think about it, but it plays a lot better than it looks. And for 19 cents, it's worth a shot. If you're going
that's
wide,
interesting.
Yeah, think about it.
That's very interesting. It comes in the Rebellion Rising deck from the newest Phyrexia expansion. And last season, I played that, and that was one of the cards I cut because it just didn't goldfish well. I never actually drew it and actually played it during live combat. So that's cool. I guess I should have kept it in.
I think part of the problem with that was that you were aiming to go to Winota, right? And the big reason to cut it was that it made white human creature tokens. The tokens it made
was little use to me.
Were of little use to you. So anyway, you had good reasons to cut it, if I remember right.
Still.
But you want to talk about your changes, Dan?
For sure. Let's see. We're talking about Clavileno First of the Blessed. This is the Blood Rites Precon, the vampire deck that basically he's a draw engine that also makes flying vampire demons. I'm a little disappointed in Clavileno, to be honest. He doesn't provide as much card draw as you would think because he can only trigger one attacking vampire turn. So you get a maximum of one card off his trigger ability if you then kill that vampire. And if you want that vampire to stick around, you may not kill it immediately, so you don't get that card draw every turn. So it's interesting. I think his ability was really centered around the 1/1 vampire tokens that the deck makes, which, I mean, very good if you have one of those engines. Anyway, in order to try to expand on Clavileno's ability, I put in the Strionic Resonator and Tessa Parlov on the first week. Unfortunately, I haven't actually gotten to use either one of those in real life yet in the deck, but I have been able to pull Diabolic Tutor and the Marauding Light Priest, which, as you guys know, is the combo piece that goes with Exquisite Blood in the deck. So I've actually gotten to draw that in every game. But sadly, I've lost like 6 out of 8 games that I've played with this deck. This is just the third week in Precon, but I've played it outside. And people hate vampires. Vampires get no love, right? So I'm usually racism. The first person.
That's the problem. Racism.
I'm telling you.
Tell Anne
I'm usually the first person kicked out of the game, honestly. Like in every game, it's like, oh God, the vampires are going to take over. Everybody kill them. And no one has moral compunctions about killing vampires. Everyone is willing. Dinosaurs, the vampires, angels, they hate vampires too. So yeah, no love.
I went after Edgar Markov first every game, and I faced him a lot last season because he's a Precon too. Yeah, and vampires, everybody hates vampires. But to be fair though, I got king made that game.
Oh, that is true.
I mean, okay, because look, here's the way it went down. These dragons in first position, mine, which is Breya in second, third was Necron Dynasty, fourth we've got this deck he's talking about with the vampires, right? Clavileno. You had everything. You had your Marauding Blight Priest. Whenever you gain life, each opponent loses life, and Exquisite Blood out. The reverse, which makes the loop. And then you swung in with enough to kill John, and or just to hit John.
Yeah, darkness.
Yeah, and he played darkness.
He had 16. And I was coming at him for 4.
Oh, that's right.
1/1 lifelinks. And he had a darkness in his hand. He had not done anything the entire game. And he was like, I'm just gonna block this play.
He got mono-screwed.
I mean, he was obviously excited. He didn't realize that either Jeff was going to win or Brant was going to win right after. As Jeff didn't win because his board state was clearly way bigger than any of us. I think the thing that Jeff did, unfortunately, was he went after me without enough damage to kill me, and he didn't kill you, which then of course left you another turn to combo off, which tutoring twice in that last turn and all of the loops that you were able to do out of your graveyard, it really did seal the deal. I think my big takeaway from that is destroy the Ashnod's altar, no matter what.
Yes, and that's why I was thinking this week, maybe I should put in Pull from Eternity instead of the Mechanaut. Instead of the cost reducer, maybe I should go with Pull from Eternity because I know everybody's going to try to exile it. But okay,
Ashnod's altar, because it's been reprinted so many times in recent past, it's come into availability for Precon League. Yeah. When we first started this in the first season, it was still a $12 card.
Yep.
And so we couldn't run these loops that are so easy to do with Ashnod's altar if you can just create creatures and mana Bob's your uncle, right? You can do it pretty much with anything. So yeah, you having that in the deck is like, I see it. I shoot the man playing it.
Yeah. Well, I've got an idea for you. Okay. So you had the loop on the board. You just needed to do damage. So you swung in. He had been mono screwed with Necron Dynasty the whole game. Jeff had been giving him zombies, walkers, with giving him 2/2 walkers, killing them, getting... Yeah, and then John's over here swinging. I'll swing with 6 2/2s, and because he wasn't doing much. He was getting mono screwed, so he gave him a bunch of creatures, and then John's just swinging for damage. And then he was holding that. But I saw the suspicious 1 mana open, and sure enough, he popped it. Not just because it was 4 life, but I think because you would have gone infinite. And then Jeff, had the choice, kill you, because you were going to do it again next turn, or kill me. But then I started thinking, maybe it's not the deck, right? A lot of that was situational, right? And it would be hard to stop a darkness. But if you have something that you can just ping, you don't have to worry about attacking. And you could do that on anybody's turn.
And that kind of comes into, that is what the deck needs. Rather than having damage that is just dealt, and the deck has it, like Blood Artist is the classic example, where I could do something like sacrifice a creature. Yeah, the deck actually has 3 or 4 cards that do that, but I didn't have one at the time. So that is something that I want to consider. And ultimately, one of the main things that is limiting in this particular meta with enchantments like Ether Flash is that all of my creatures die immediately when they come out. And Jeff, for multiple turns, had the ability to either tap Hansk, do 2 points of damage, which kills my commander, which he did twice. He killed Clavileno twice just by tapping his commander, or just doing one of those small 2-point board wipes that are recursive that he was able to do over and over again. So even my Blight Priest is a 3/2, so she would have died immediately. So it was a conundrum of trying to find that window, and I found the window. Everyone was tapped out except that one black, that darkness. That was it. So yeah, that sealed my fate. So anyway,
everybody was tapped out except for 1 black mana, and that was the
except one black mana.
Oh, it stings. But so you do have some pingers. Really stings. That's the strategy, right? A little less attack because it's hard to get through their 6/6 flyers or whatever.
Right. And there's a certain argument for Carmen in the deck. She's an alternate commander. She's recursive. I think she's like 3 black and a white. Anytime player sacrifices a permanent, she gets a +1/+1. And when she attacks, you can take something out of the graveyard, CMC equal to her power. So it's just bring something back from the graveyard, but she doesn't give you card draw. So I'm kind of, she seems like a really good one of the 99 in this case. She seems like an amazing commander in a Grave Pack deck that you would just build from scratch, because there are tons of creatures that you would just throw in to make everybody sack that you could just recurse and, have a constant, destruction of board state.
Yeah, it sounds like you'd have to add a lot of stuff like basically dredge effects to fill your graveyard as fast as possible. And then that's kind of the card draw. She gives you access to those.
So I'm sticking with Clavileno. I'm sticking with my boy. I'm hoping he does me well, because I haven't won in a while. But I really do love the deck. It's really got a lot of flavor. I love the fact that the vampires are conquistadors, because everybody hates the colonialists of that time anyway. So, fair. Kill them. My ads start from there. I needed a 1-drop. There are so many 2-drops in this deck, it's not even funny. So I'm trading out some of the 2-drops for 1. So I put Vampire Cutthroat. It's cheap. A lot of 1/1 vampires are expensive out there. So I just threw in a Skulker with lifelink, because sometimes I just want to hit somebody for 1 damage. I added Call of the Ring, and this is my MVP for the week. I think during this game, it netted me about 10 cards, maybe more, with the amount. Well, it was the card draw every round. I have lifelinkers in the deck, so paying 2 life every round really didn't bother me. I was able to connect with a 1/1 every round. So by the time I was tempted 4 times, you guys were being hit by 3 points of damage. I was drawing 2 cards at the beginning of my turn, and then drawing and discarding for the Ring Bearer. So I was actually filling up my graveyard at that point. So it really made the deck sing. So I highly recommend this for this deck because it has lifelink in it.
$1.24. Well worth it. And it's got cool art.
Yeah.
But man, I'll tell you, as your opponent, we did not like the 3 damage that kept hitting us over and over and over.
So I'm trying to take advantage of Clavileno, but I also realize that I'm not going to get as much card draw out of him as I want. So I've been augmenting a little bit with tutors, since black is the strongest tutor color. But strangely enough, this one's white. A Forerunner of the Legion. It's a 2 and a white for a 2/2 vampire. And when the Forerunner of the Legion enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a vampire card, reveal it, shuffle your library, and put that card on top of it. Whenever another vampire enters the battlefield under your control, target creature gets +1/+1 till end of turn. So it's got 2 pretty decent abilities. It's a vampire-specific tutor, which 1, flavor, on point. 2, I can attack with it, switch it for Clavileno, and I don't mind it dying necessarily. And it's also got a pump effect, which will help me later on down the line with my ads for this week. Because there are a couple of cards that benefit from getting +1/+1 counters, and I think I'm adding one this week.
What about Savine's Reclamation? Because you could also target Call of the Ring, your MVP from this last week.
That's very true. Very true. I mean, Sabine's Reclamation is kind of an argument. It's like, why wouldn't you put it in the deck if you have room for it and your CMC is low enough?
That's true. It's become a real staple.
Yeah. It's really, it's like, why wouldn't you if you had the space? And yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of things that could pull out of the graveyard that would really matter to this deck. Unfortunately, Exquisite Blood is way too expensive for that kind of deck, which is really what I'm looking for. Getting that enchantment out of the graveyard, because I guarantee someone's going to disenchant it or destroy it at one point when I play it.
True. Yeah, and once they figure out the Call of the Ring, they're going to stop from getting all your Ring Bearer triggers.
I want to talk about Pandorica.
Oh, the Pandorica, yeah. I added this. Chris, you suggested this. This is interesting. I'm curious to see what you say about it, considering your comments about this kind of effect a few minutes ago. So the Pandorica is a 2 and a white. It's a legendary artifact. You may choose not to untap the Pandorica during your untap step. And for 1 and a white tap, you untap another target non-land permanent, then it phases out. It can't phase in for as long as the Pandorica remains tapped. And when the Pandorica becomes untapped or leaves the battlefield, that permanent phases in. Activate only as a sorcery. So it's a reusable coffin that I can lock people's commander in for 5 mana the first time.
Wow.
That's really interesting to me. And I stand by what I said earlier, but the difference between this and Conclave Tribunal is that this can actually remove people's commanders and keep them removed, and it's reusable. I don't like the fact that it's 5, but the fact is that the only other abilities like this are enchantments like Oubliette or Darksteel Mutation or things like that, and they aren't reusable. So the Pandorica can also hit something. It can hit any non-land permanent.
Right.
You were saying that you need to kill Ashnod's Altar, and you've removed all the removal from the deck. Utter End.
No, I know.
Return to Dust. You've yanked it all.
Right. I need to add some of that back in. I admit that. I'm trying to get the deck to operate at a faster pace, I think. And so, yeah, I think that fell too. But actually, I felt like I was replacing Dust to Dust with the Pandorica, since it was a 1-to-1 swap.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I thought I was safe from Draenith Magistrate type effects in Precon League with the $5 a week budget. But here he comes in with a 12-cent rare from Doctor Who that can lock out my commander. Cents, right? Yeah, they can lock out my commander, and it's reusable. Basically, it can stop her more than once. Yeah,
as opposed to Oubliette, which is also like $1.40. it's a 1 and black for almost the same. It's an enchantment and you can only use it once. So,
right.
Yeah, I like the Pandorica. So good suggestion, Chris. I hope I get to use it against you.
Yeah, Derevi is real hard. Derevi's real hard to get rid of, and the Pandorica might be one of the only things that can right. do it.
And last but not least, this is just another value engine. I'm trying to get some of the vampires that I really like to be doing something else with that 4 to 6 mana. So I'm replacing one of the big fatties with this one. You probably all know him. He's Edgar
Charmed Groom.
Yeah, Edgar Charmed Groom. I've got the Dracula the Voyager version of him, but he's a 2 white and a black. Other vampires you control get +1/+1. He's got the Anthem. Edgar Charmed Groom dies, return it to the battlefield, transform under its owner control. It is a 4/4, and when it flips over, it becomes Edgar's Asket of Native Earth, Edgar's Often. And at the beginning of your upkeep, create a 1/1 black and white vampire creature token with lifelink, and put a bloodline counter on Edgar Markov's Coffin. If there are 3 or more bloodline counters on it, remove those counters and transform it. He's sticky, he's an Anthem effect, and he makes me 3 1/1 vampire tokens, which, as I said before, makes the world go around with this deck. So, rather than having a vampire that makes like bat tokens, I wanted something that made vampire tokens, which is one of the reasons I cut a dead card for me. Never speaking to him again, and unfortunately I've got multiple copies of him.
Timothar, Baron of Bat.
Oh, you knew it. You knew it. I mean, I know you, Chris, you said that he was a pretty cool card, but the past few times that I've had him, and I've had him in play, he really didn't matter a whole lot. I'd maybe get like 1 bat. I've never gotten anything out of the graveyard from that bat, because effectively if it dies on my turn, I have to wait for the other turn to come around to attack with that bat to get anything out of the graveyard. And it's just slow. So I'd rather just have 1/1 vampires, which is why I replaced him with Edgar.
That seems like good reasoning.
There's also 3 to 4 vampires in here that just grab a vampire or permanent from the graveyard and put it into the battlefield. So I really didn't want to inhibit their choices if I was able to cast them. And I want to have things, in my graveyard. I mean, I get it. It protects them in exile. So I kind of regretted it. I really wish he wasn't Baron of Bats. He was Baron of 1/1 vampires, because it would be a lot more useful.
Sure.
Let's see. For next week, what am I?
Character too. Like Blackula.
He
does. Like the movie.
Yeah, like the movie. I mean, look at that. That outfit is pimping.
Yeah, with that collar.
That's an incredible outfit, man. Look at that thing. Definitely got style. And that sword, it's absolutely ridiculous. But nonetheless, I guess he's just a little too impractical.
You were saying that a lot of your guys were 2 toughness and those pyroclasm type effects, 2 to all creatures, or honks doing 2 damage to your creatures. This Anthem effect helps keep them alive.
Sure. And I've got 4 other Anthem effects in the deck. I mean, vampires have several cards that are available. The deck came with like 3 of them, 2 enchantments and a creature. So I'm just adding to that.
Yeah, that should help answer that. And then, as far as like the bringing stuff back, you don't have to really worry about that yet. Adding cards to help bring things back until after people figure out your combo.
Slowly. Yeah. I mean, once people figure out Exquisite Blood actually came in the deck, you just go to EDH Rec.
Right.
And look at all the common combos and like, oh, he's going to have that. And one of those cards actually shows up in this week's update. I'll get to that. But first, from low to high, because I try to add things on a curve where Chris yells at me, is Dusk Legion Duelist. It's a 1 and a white vigilant vampire. When 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put on the duelist, draw a card. This ability triggers only once per turn. Now, I've got multiple vampires in here that put +1/+1 counters on my other vampires. I've got the Blade of the Blood Chief that adds 2 +1/+1 counters anytime something dies. So if I slap that on her, I'm getting a card. every turn that there's combat. That's not a bad thing. And she's not expensive at 50 cents. Next edition is Sanguinate. I basically needed a way to win without attacking, and I needed something that could do a variable amount of damage. Sanguinate does all that thing for me for 2 black and an X. I can cast it for 3 to hit everybody for 1, like in the situation that we described for my last game. Rather than needing combat damage, I could have just popped it and done 1 damage. But we all know that this is best when served with 8 mana.
Mm-hmm.
And
but
just sucking the table dry.
It. This is all you needed, because that would have gotten around darkness. Oh, you're going to darkness? Okay, I'll just cast for 3 mana. There,
Same
I win.
way.
Boom,
Sure.
I win.
Exactly.
Yeah, nice ad. And for $2.40, that was a boogeyman in Commander for a long time.
Yeah, I'm surprised.
$1.94 currently.
Really surprised that the price has come down so much.
It got reprinted in Eldraine, and then I think it got reprinted again in
Commander Masters.
Commander Masters, yeah, because that's the copy I have is Commander Masters.
Yep.
So yeah, it's been reprinted twice.
Okay, so they're printing it into the ground. I love that. I love that story.
Yeah, $1.80 for the original somehow. The original is the cheapest now. Wow. Okay, cool.
So,
what else you got? I'm looking them up.
This Invasion of New Capenna. It's one of the invasion cards, probably one of the less well-known ones, because it's not super high powerful, but I think thematically it's really good for the deck. It's a white and a black. It has the normal siege enters. You assign it to someone. It's a siege 4. So Invasion of New Capenna enters the battlefield. You may sacrifice an artifact or creature. When you do, exile target artifact or creature an opponent controls. So basically it's an exile with the ability to choose when I sacrifice one of my vampires from Clavileno's trigger ability to make a 4/3 flying demon. Because that's one of the things about this deck. If you want to be able to draw a card, you need to be able to sacrifice a creature that has Clavileno's triggered effect on it. So having something that I can sacrifice a creature and get rid of somebody else's creature is really fun. But the back of the card is really my favorite. And it's the Holy Frazzle Cannon. The Holy Frazzle Cannon is an artifact. Yes, it is hilarious. When equipped creature attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature and each other creature you control that shares a creature type with it. Equip 1. I have a white and a black that I can use to exile an artifact or creature with, sacrifice one of my creatures, get a draw, get a demon, and then attach it to one of my vampires that then pumps all of my other vampires. I added the duelist in here. Every time she gets pumped, I get to draw a card off that. So I thought it was a fun ad for the color value and the fact that it's a tribal deck.
Which duelist?
Cool.
Duelist Heritage? No. What's it called?
No, the one you were looking at earlier, the vampire.
The Dusk Legion Duelist.
Oh, Dusk Legion. Yeah.
Yeah, we already looked at that one, though.
Yep.
Anyway, yeah. Next on the list is a combo piece that goes with Exquisite Blood. You can look it up. It's a Cliffhaven Vampire. It's 2 white and a black for a 2/4 flyer that whenever you gain life, each opponent loses 1 life. It's a 2/4. So it's gonna survive those Ether Flash effects a lot easier coming into play. It's just 1 extra mana on the other 2. And the last ad is one of my favorites. Drana and Linvala. She's a flying vigilant vampire angel 3/4. Activated abilities of creatures your opponents control can't be activated. D and V have all the activated abilities of all creatures your opponents control. You may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to activate those abilities.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
No.
No. All of the fire breathing effects that the dragons have.
Breya. Activated abilities of creatures your opponents control can't be activated. That's my whole thing.
Yeah, man. I love this card.
Oh boy.
It's a great ad. I was thrilled that she was a vampire.
So about those answers, I was saying I needed to add.
Yeah, so she's going to be fun. So that's pretty much my ads. I'm sticking to the Clavileno. I'm sticking to the tribal. As you said, Chris, I probably need to assess and get a little bit more direct removal. But I added direct removal. Yeah.
So just something to look at.
Yeah. I also tried to replace single card removal with board wipes, which I think I'm running 4 in the deck, 6.
Right. Those are really good when your commander gives you the ability to draw cards when your creatures die and replace them with bigger creatures. I was just saying that you've already added the only way I can think of to make Clavileno's ability fire off more in Strionic Resonator. And, then the death trigger with Taste of Karlov. Right. I can't think of any other ways to make that ability fire off more easily.
Right. There's There's Drinvod, Carnage Dominus. He's like $6. Which I love him, so I may skip an entire week just to get him in the deck.
What's this guy's name? I'm gonna have to look him up now. It sounds interesting.
Drivnod, Carnage Dominus.
3
and 2 black. He's a legendary Phyrexian horror. He's an 8/3 for 5 first of all. So he's got a big old front on it. If a creature dying causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, an ability triggers an additional time. And you can use 2 Phyrexian to exile 3 creature cards from your graveyard, put an indestructible counter on the Carnage Dominus. He's pretty sexy. He's like a Phyrexian version of
Taste of Karlov.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's an 8/3, possibly indestructible.
Let's see what we can get him for here. All versions. Because this sounds like the card you need to save up for. $4.71. That's not too bad.
What?
That's not bad. You still have, 29 cents. Actually, I think you're carrying some over, aren't you?
Oh, I see.
567.
So the flashy all will be one version is less expensive than the version I had in the list. Very cool. I mean, that's within reach. That's 1 week. And honestly, this deck is tight enough that I don't know how many other tweaks I'm gonna be making. I don't think I'm gonna be making 5, maybe making less than that.
Well, you could get some spicy cards that way. And one thing that a lot of people forget about, mana base.
And that is the problem with this deck, because it has all the tap lands and none of the really good white-black lands. So there are a few things that I've looked at. One interesting one that's within budget is High Market.
High Market? That's in budget?
Yeah. That's within budget. Well, it was at one point. It's $271. Add 1 to your mana pool or tap it to sacrifice a creature and gain 1 life. Obviously, this is the poor man's Phyrexian Tower, where you have a land that you can stack something to do a point of damage with your Blood Artist and combo off the Exquisite Blood.
With a land.
It's a land. Yeah.
Now that's funny. Yeah, and I see right here, $397 plus shipping.
It's definitely within budget. So.
Got reprinted in Adventures of the Forgotten Realms. That's why it's so cheap.
That's my direction. Those are my updates.
I think you're on the right track. You've got a lot of really good ideas here.
As long as people are just not screw the vampires, kill them all first.
Yeah.
At what point will you consider this a failure?
Wow.
Like, I'm thinking that if I don't get wins in the first 5 weeks with Derevi, I will consider this a failure, and I won't attempt this strategy again.
What if you win the next 5, though?
Well, it's, I could be proven wrong. At some point, I really wish I'd walked away from, what is his name, Gore Muldrak, the season where I got 0 wins. I wish I'd walked away quite a bit earlier and sort of...
Well, Chris, philosophically speaking, let's take a look at my win average over the past 3 seasons. I have probably won 4 games.
Oof.
Over 3 seasons. So it really depends on why you're playing a Precon League. Are you playing to learn new strategies and directions? Absolutely. But you're definitely learning how to lose.
That's for sure. And you're learning
true.
what doesn't work and what things used to be good, but nowadays they're just not fast enough. Well, we got a lot to think about after this next game coming up, because I know where my deck wants to go, but then you get out there and you face some opponents and you don't know what to expect.
And I think with your deck, since it's proven to be a combo monster, you may have a punchable face next week.
I'm definitely going to have a punchable face next week. That's one thing.
Not that changes anything. You always have a punchable face.
Yeah, I usually get attacked first. Unless I'm playing against vampires, then they always get attacked first.
Absolutely. That is true.
Pretty stiff competition. We've got 3 pods, 12 players in this Precon Season 6. I'm excited to see where it goes next. Tune in for the next episode, everybody. Thanks for listening. Be safe on the drive home.
As priority?
If we inspired your deck brewing ideas, help your friends. They might need it. Drop this on your favorite Discord. Tap that untapped like. Then we know you want more budget upgrade paths. This is Precon Life. Pass turn.